I have to use this frankincense and this myrrh on him and bury him properly. His body has to be there, has to be somewhere, because if it isn't, if he isn't, and she felt horror wash over her, the ground opened up before her feet, and herself began to fall and fall and fall. She stopped in the road and stood perfectly still. Mary of Magdala, she addressed herself firmly, "Stop this. You are looking through the eyes of those 7 devils he drove out of you. And if you keep on, they will blind you as they did before. You've been healed. They're gone. But if you let them, they can come back, as he warned you. Hush now. Remember him living. Remember how he healed you, and how that felt, and how wonderful life has been since." Up until Friday, her listening self interrupted bitterly, and the ground began to open up again. "Stop," she said steadily. "Just remember the healing, and let your feet keep on walking. Trust him. He will not abandon you. He will be found. When he has he ever failed you before?" "Never," her rebellious, terrified self admitted, and obediently she began to remember. It had been 2 years ago. She had been suffering for ages, being not really ill, but in a misery for which there had been no visible cause, having no reason to want to go on living, and no real justification for not embracing the good life she had come to. Her widowed father, who had found her a good husband, had died, contented after a long time. She had mourned him, but with little sense of loss, for they had never been close. She had been his only heir, and found, surprised, that she was now wealthy. Then her husband, a wealthy widower, nearer her father's age than her own, had also died. He had been kind to her, and they were good companions, but he had never engaged her heart, so she felt her loss as a gentle regret rather than a heart-tearing grief. They had no children, and the rest of his family had died before him, so she was, again, the only heir. That left her very rich indeed, and independent, in full control of her fortune and her destiny. Women who knew her had told her frankly they envied her, and then returned to lives that seemed to her to be full of overflowing with people, responsibility, and meaningful things that only they could do. But there had been nothing in the world that she had absolutely had to do, and there had not been a single soul who really depended on her just to be. She had seemed to herself to be living in a thick, clammy fog that kept her from touching or being touched by anyone or feeling anything. That fog had made the once solid world a place of dim, fearsome shadows, and the ground under her feet a treacherous bog that might open and swallow her at any moment. That had been the start of it, and things had become worse. There were the symptoms of illness that had no cause any doctor could find. The headaches, the miseries of bowel and stomach, the sudden, lancing pains in every muscle that put her to bed where she could not remain, for even her skin seemed to hurt. The sudden breathlessness when her heart would pound much too fast. She would get sweaty, her vision would dim, and the room would spin. There were the dreams when she slept, which were bad, and the dreams, for some odd state, when she was awake yet not awake, which were worse, for in them she heard voices and saw things that she knew weren't there. And there had been, under it all, walking and sleeping, a leaden sense of hopelessness, helplessness, utter aloneness, and always lurking unseen just around the next corner, an absolute nameless terror into which she would fall and fall